They were starting to say.
Where are we? What are we doing?
He muted them, so he drew.
There you are. Now you guys are live.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Now it's safe to really.
In about 15 seconds, you'll show up on that screen.
Oh, I
there.
see. I
So
see.
you're on a little bit of a delay.
So you can catch us when,
it's delayed.
when we misspeak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's discombobulating.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So we have got. Let
Yeah.
me get my.
Here, let's.
Do we make a good composition?
There we go. Sort
There we
of.
go. Here, let's fix this. Let's see. Oh man, it is way delayed.
Can we concept it first? I don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here we go.
Here we go.
So
Okay.
professional.
All right, so hello everybody. Welcome to our 11th anniversary live stream, and we are sitting down with some fine folks from our art department. Please introduce yourself.
Mark Lizotte.
I am Todd DeMelle.
And I am Jen Melnick.
All right, and you are knee deep in LOTRO stuff for the summer festival and for update 23, which I know we can't talk a lot about at this point.
Yeah. What can we talk about for 23? What's out there? At
We
this
have
point?
said that it's the Gray Mountains.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Okay.
So
Okay. So not much.
not much.
Not much.
Yeah, but before that, we do have the summer festival and things like that. And I know, Jen in particular, you have taken point on doing a lot of our festival itemization. Is that correct, right?
Yeah. Last year I did. We've kind of split it up this year. We've been, not as much this year.
Well,
Not as much this
I've
year?
actually been doing a lot of DDO stuff this year too.
Okay.
A lot more.
All right. Sure,
The
sure.
other game.
the other game. But you've been doing all the
Yeah.
awesome pet animals, like the
Jen's
hedgehog
Jen's
and
really
everything.
kind of
and
pushed
how's
our,
the
our small
hedgehogs?
creature
Actually, talk into
population.
the mic a little
Oh,
more if you would,
okay.
Jen.
We're having that problem again.
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so last year was like the year of the kites, and
Yeah.
this year is like the year of tiny, cute
the little
animals,
creatures,
of the
yeah.
little creatures.
Are
And their
you,
little homes that you made.
are you the person?
That's kind of a summer spoiler. It's okay.
Yeah. Did you hear that, folks?
Can you beat that?
I don't know. Well, it was kind of noisy. I don't know how many of those picked it up. But so you did do the hedgehog?
Yes,
Okay.
Oliver. But that's always a group effort because that was also like he needed new animations, and Rob did a great job on making him run really cute too, and like
Jen's,
do a little
I
sniff
think
around.
Jen's been very influential in just sort of setting direction for some of the cool ideas, especially in the form of animals. I think that like if we were to start listing the creatures that would fit in a bread box that you've done, I mean you did the quails, you did.
Yeah.
The hedgehogs. I'm trying.
We can't
the
talk
gourd
about the new
lurker
ones.
from the gourd lurker.
Yes.
Gordy.
So the
It
We
was
can
like
mention
pumpkin-
we can
pumpkin
mention the
lurker.
beaver because that's out.
So the beaver.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
beaver's
So
out.
Basically, anything that could follow you around and you wouldn't mind it, she made it.
He's cute.
Hey, that's a
I'm
matter
good
of
at cute.
taste. Yeah.
Well, a
Yeah.
beaver, I'd be fine. I'd be scared of a possum. Maybe.
Fun
Yeah,
story.
beavers are scary.
When I was a teenager, I lived on a lake in Minnesota, and it was out in the middle of nowhere, out in the country, and I used to swim in the lake. And one day when I was swimming in the lake, I got hit by a beaver that was swimming, like actually just
tail
front
or-
on,
Oh.
boom.
The tail or the
The
whole...
front of the thing.
So sort of
it-
torpedoed.
Yeah, I got torpedoed by a beaver. It had basically a bunch of sticks in its mouth, so presumably you couldn't see in front of it very well. It didn't realize that I was standing there because I'd just been standing there and I hadn't been making a lot of splashing.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, right in the side of myself, I had this mass like of branches and because it was pokey and stuff.
If you could
hit me in the side, I was like, "There are no sharks in lakes. What is going on here?" Right?
I think
And
actually you're really lucky that it wasn't his tail to hit you, because I think he probably could have broken things.
It could be, but
They're kind of territorial, beavers, aren't they?
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are.
It clearly dropped its stick and then ran away. At which point I was like, "Hey, I got hit by a beaver. That doesn't
I'm
happen
trying to
too
imagine
often."
what kind of impact that might have. Was that like somebody like hitting you with a basketball?
Yeah,
or,
it was more surprising than anything because of the sticks up front, right? So it felt teeth-like because I hadn't actually seen it
yeah,
coming.
I can imagine that being
so.
pretty traumatic.
Yeah. So, so we've been hinting, but there are new pets coming.
Yeah, there
Yes.
are new pets coming.
All right.
But it's been cool, like especially Dalelands has been an area where like the pheasants initially were going to be ambient pets or ambient animals for
Big creatures.
yeah for that area
Yeah.
because they're classic game animals for that style of like woodland areas and like open fields and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Dale was a fun place, though.
So Jen's been bringing a great perspective. Sometimes spending a really long time with the content, I don't know, you sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And we're like, that's a great question. Why haven't we done that yet? I don't know. You add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And we're like, that's a great question. Why haven't we done
Like the
that
first
yet?
time we saw them running.
Add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And they're just like, that's a great question.
Like the first time we saw them running.
Add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And they're just like, that's a great question.
Like the first time we saw them running.
Add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And they're just like, that's a great question.
Like the first time we saw them running.
Add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And they're just like, that's a great question.
Like the first time we saw them running.
Add a quail. You sort of take some of it for granted. And Jen's been able to bring a perspective of like, why haven't you guys done this yet? And they're just like, that's a great question. Tokens of a type, variants on existing things. I think we're making more new things these days than we have in a little while. So,
Yeah. I think a pretty extensive, like, the whole, I guess, natural creature, like, pack that we have for the game is pretty extensive. So we have a lot of cool stuff to pull from.
we do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Sorry, I had Facebook decided to quickly unmute, so we quickly got into a loop scenario there, but it was just for a few seconds. So
It's so weird. Like, I see the delay on the screen, and then I see what people are asking, and then I hear what you're saying. It's like...
Yeah, I'm trying not to look at the screen.
I know.
I feel like I will go
Nice.
Tharn.
Yeah.
To use a watership down.
Yep.
So, yeah, see, I can see the delay now.
So we are, I guess, without giving away too many spoilers, what are you working on today? What is it that you guys are working on?
Today?
Yeah.
Literally today?
DDO stuff.
Yeah, DDO stuff.
So
set right
we have a cadence that kind of has peaks and valleys, and so we are mostly done with the 22 dot content, which includes summer stuff and a few other things. And there are a lot of planning meetings taking place for 23, which I guess we can just say are taking us up into the Grey Mountains.
Yep.
Today we were looking at the divisions, the map of the landscape that we're planning on getting built out, which the World Team has already started in on and actually has made some good progress on, and looking at monster choices for what's going to populate the region, and looking at options that some of the content designers have some specific ideas for boss monsters that they want for some of the content. So we were looking at that stuff. So that's one of the steps in the early pre-pro process, and that's the one we're up to at this point, looking at monsters.
And some really cool, like, going in directions with different cultures, too, in that area that we really get.
We have been doing that a lot. Like, the Dalelands and the Lake Town, there were a lot of cultural... that was actually a challenging update for that reason, is we had to do elves and dwarves and men and Easterlings, and there was a lot going on there.
I know, I really enjoyed us doing Lake Town, and it was thanks to Charlie Clayton, our world builder, that he was
Charlie.
really willing
Are you watching
to
Charlie?
work
We
crazy.
miss you, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yep.
We miss he was just willing to like build and rebuild and plan it out. We using like old assets that we had as templates for the new ones, and it was just fun to make Lake Town be all kind of awkward and up and down, and
Yeah, Lake Town turned out. I think Lake Town turned out beautifully. I think the whole region turned out beautifully.
Yep.
We've been talking about doing sort of panoramic captures of some of the spaces, and I think that in particular, that space lends itself to that really nicely with Erebor and coming around past Dell to Lake Town. There's actually a little hill which we call Schmeribor. If you go on top of it, you get a beautiful panoramic vista. It's really nice. We should capture that at some point and publish it.
Yeah, for those of you paying attention on Facebook who have asked about it in the past, we are looking into doing that kind of 360 camera thing on some public areas. It's a little weird how you get it to recognize, but we're working on that stuff.
I think
so
it would be cool.
it would be very cool.
Yeah. Well, if you want a 360 panorama of the game, go into the game.
Yeah,
and then
that too, right?
Hold down one of your arrow
But-
keys. Or, yeah, you can do it that way too.
Yeah.
I've
yeah.
noticed, like, especially because widescreen 4K monitors are starting to come out more and more. I'm seeing
Yeah.
players like that's really cool to see in widescreen.
Yeah.
I need to get one of those monitors
Yeah.
too. I
Or
like
when
my
you've got the setup with the multi-monitors. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is very cool.
Yeah, for sure. Tally Twitch, if you have a spam issue in game, send a ticket in for harassment through help.standingstonegames.com or through the in-game menu. They'll take care of you right there. So Blind Monk has a question which I ask a lot, which is, can we release more concept art? You guys do a lot of concept art, and one of the things is like, I love to see this. A lot of the community likes to see this.
Yeah.
Sometimes artists don't like to see their concept art get published, you know?
Yeah, well,
I don't know why that
I-
is.
if one of you guys wants to weigh in a
Well,
little
can
bit
I-
on this, there's a lot that can be said about this.
Can I explain the reality or the? Do I have to?
No, you can, I mean, it's true, yeah.
Well, no. I've always been bad about like concepting as I build it with 3D. So it's
Yeah.
it's like there is no concept art. It's for a lot of things. I mean, all the armors and things like that. There's concept art for. But like for Lake Town and all that, it's just like looking on Google for like reference ideas from different cultures, and then I just start playing with the shapes because there's no better way to make an interesting 3D object than to build it in 3D. And then you know that it looks good from all the different sides, rather than having to like translate something into a 2D, then from a 2D to a 3D.
Yeah.
And I just make my like significant elements of architecture, and you just keep adding those to the basic buildings, and it's fun, and you can do some cool things. And then world builders just take it a step further of taking those pieces and putting them together in interesting ways that I wasn't even thinking of yet, you know, and
There's
Not-
also
it makes it very rich.
there's different types of concept art. I think people
Sure.
are more familiar with like the more illustrative, like
Yeah.
picture type. But in a production environment, you don't always have the time to sit there and do like a 20-hour concept. You have maybe 3 hours to get like spitball the idea and get the overall silhouette and get the overall, I guess, the textures, like what different
material and construction.
Yeah.
So my sort of like reductionist take on it is concept serves a purpose. Concept is a way to show stakeholders what your intention is
Yeah.
at minimum cost, right? So you can
Yeah.
reduce the risk of, oh, I just spent a week working on this, it's the wrong thing, right? Like what do you
Yeah.
want is you want to show. So I would say there's always a concept phase. There and concept can come in many forms. Oftentimes, I mean, it can just be a text, right? Describing like it should be this and not this.
or it could be a mood board, like
It could be a mood
Pinterest
board,
or,
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, talking to Chris Pearson, our lore master, it's always like trying to get a sense of where the culture should be and what it would match up with. He always, when he figures out the areas, he's looking at pictures from around the world of like what the landscape should be like, and you just sort of work off that. I mean,
So one of the things that we all struggle with maintaining the games is we got to get a lot done in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So we are looking for efficiencies between idea and finish wherever we can find them. So one of the things that the artists are able to bring. I mean, all of the artists on the art team bring a lot of creativity and experience. And one of the things we are trying to cultivate is tapping into that so that the process doesn't go through a sort of atomic concept phase that goes through a lengthy review process, right? Like we get the broad strokes out to the people that are concerned about them in a timely fashion in whatever means is most efficient, and then move as quickly as into actual development as we can. And then we'll have a series of reviews through that process that lets us redirect based on how things are working.
yeah, as I'm building things, I'm going back and forth with the world builders, like Charlie with Lake Town, and saying like, well, what do you need? He'll use like maybe the covered bridges from Rohan to go to Lake Town, and we realized quite quickly that we didn't want like a version of that because we wanted it to be open air. So then I'm just building a whole new bridge thing. But then I've gotten the concept size that he needs, for it.
It ends up being like a stand-in. Like we don't necessarily have a formal gray box portion where everything is just primitives, but they'll take pre-existing assets and know, like, this is the proportion we need, this is roughly how it's going to fit together, and then we'll take it and we'll polish it up to what it is actually supposed to be. So
I imagine, we have typically a very veteran staff here at Standing Stone Games. The people who have been, Standing Stone Games is largely made up of people who have long worked on DDO and LOTRO. We have new people too, of course, but we have a very veteran group here, and I imagine the more years you put in doing artwork and that for LOTRO, maybe the less you need to rely on some of that early concepting that you might have to do, if you're starting fresh on a project. So.
I was bad about this long ago when I worked at Looking Glass. I worked on Thief the Dog project, and we needed to have concept art to go for it, and what had to happen is one of our illustrators looked at the stuff that I had built and drew sketches of it, and we submitted that as the concept art of the things that were done. They're just, a lot of times luckily I get enough buy-off from people, and people trust me enough, and I've not failed too often that we can do it that way.
Right.
And then you shouldn't, you don't necessarily want to be a slave to your concept, because something that might work in 2D, when you actually get it into 3D space, this happens actually a lot with armor, like shoulder pads, bigger things that might not necessarily translate well to the 3D space. There's a lot of iterative back and forth. You want the overall idea to kind of stick, but you
want the broad strokes. And so sometimes you run into issues, especially we try to use existing pieces as starting points as much as possible, because that does allow us to do more quickly. But very often you'll find if you spend time doing a concept without looking at how you're going to implement it, those legs mirror. That whole thing I just did over here doesn't work, because either I need to, rebuild this thing or adapt the concept to that. So, so keeping it just expressive enough and informative enough so that the people who are in positions to care can see what's going on and can say that's right, or make sure you think of this, or and we find we have a pretty good batting average that way. We have a lot of room to adjust in the course of development as well. So some things do have concept. It's not often. It's not the kind of thing that you want to, as an artist, publish, right? Like some of this stuff is pretty loose around the end, and then you get into the issue is when you want to publish it, you end up making it something other than what its practical purpose is. As Mark says, the best way to always hit your target is to throw something and call what you hit the target, right? So you can do that and make concept art after the fact.
And then also it's who you're making it for. If you're an artist who, I'm a 3D modeler, but I do my own concepting on things to get buy-off initially, I don't need to make it super detailed, because I also know the parts that aren't filled in, I'm holding up here. If you're making something for somebody else as a template that they have to work off of, then oftentimes you do tend to make it more detailed. But we're all we're pretty good at being our own.
I mean, I think we
and that's part of the gig.
And it's I like to put the effort of polishing the art in the finished product rather than the sketch of it.
I know. There is a piece to this as well, which really has to do with more the marketing side of things, which is if we want to release some of this concept art, it has to go through an approvals process that it doesn't necessarily need to go through in terms of getting, in something that's done internally. So, frankly, that is a lot of why you don't see as much concept art as you.
There are some hoops that need to be gone through, because then it becomes more than that becomes product that's being released.
Yeah,
instead
exactly
of just, something to fill a purpose.
And then also that is something that's more often done in the industry, is that the concept art you do see released has been, I don't want to say doctored, but it has been polished than what it was initially.
I mean, they're like beauty pieces that someone has gone over and finished this thing.
There's a big difference between marketing art that's released that are full illustrations or full this is to flavor to get you excited, and art that we use to work off of, our blueprints.
And I mean, I would be interested in seeing other teams. What's behind the curtain, and then just that doesn't look very good. I could do that, right?
Nice.
And then at the end, it because of the process, it turns into something that comes together and works well. So I could see why that would have hold some interest for people. And I'm not sure if when people ask for concept art, if that's the aspect of it that they're interested in, or whether they just want to see paintings of our work.
It's a mix of both, I think. Yeah.
Because the former is what we'd be more prepared to regularly show if we wanted to go that route.
All right, this is kind of a basic question, but I like it. Dr. Smirks asks, as a member of the art team, what is your favorite visual or location in LOTRO? Do you have... pick which baby is best, please. Do you have like a personal favorite? Maybe something that is particularly tied to maybe even a personal memory or something like that. Just an area where it's like, every time I'm wandering through the world or I see this, I always think, oh yeah, I like that one.
I just more in like happy with the, like Mordor was the last thing. I mean, there's no, thank God, personal memory. Actually, I wouldn't mind having dreams of weird stuff like that, but of like going through and seeing what the world builders put together and being like, oh wow, that really came off right. Like I'm proud of that. That has a good atmospheric feel to it, and there's a rich detailing in the background. You know, that's the kind of stuff that'll make me happy. And of course, Minas Tirith you have to always, because that was just such a gigantic thing to undertake, that the bow to it and all the stupid hallways in the bow up to the corridors. Yeah.
Nice.
I think, go ahead.
I actually really, I started at North Athelion, that's when I kind of cycled on, full time. But I think Philogoth, for me, in terms of seeing how that space came together out of everything, I love Mordor and I love Bagrenath and those areas. But, as an artist, that was a really cool technical challenge of how do you fill a big space like that, make it optimized so it, runs well, and then also has that visual interest. That was, the coolest space, I feel like.
Yeah.
This is actually a pretty interesting question from Kanejal. Do we keep old layered versions of items around to basically recolor and reuse them? Like when we're making a set of armor, do we have the capability of, and here's the red one, and here's the green one, and here's the blue one?
Our data tree is, so it's... This is a
That's
game
all we do. That's all we do.
This is a game that's been built over the course of more than 15 years, and there's been a lot of changes of the guard and different levels of procedure and accountability and standards have come and gone, and so yes, there is some of that. And we do want to try to take advantage of existing things when we can. So kit bashing, you don't need a layered Photoshop necessarily to a Photoshop file to accomplish that. Sometimes you'll say to yourself, "Wow, it would be great if I could find the original of this," and go in and you're like, "Wow, maybe that's it." Open it up and you're like, "Wow, that is it." Very seldom.
But I think also on even we have a robust cosmetic system in LOTRO. And people will be like, well, I want this, but I want this blue, or I want this armor, or that armor from a couple updates ago, can I please wear that, And so a lot of I imagine that underlying tech can be used for that as well?
Sure. I mean, you don't need much other than the actual asset to make a variant, the tools out there. This is one sort of dimension of art skill that an artist working in this environment really needs to have in their tool bag. So it's not just painting. It's kind of almost photo manipulation. It's selection and adjustment and taking things out and adding things in. That's certainly a way to get an effect and to leverage existing things. Add dimension, so this is in one way. Like if we're kit bashing from dwarf stuff, we can be pretty assured that the dwarf concept is going to be consistent with what's been established already.
And it's nice starting with something that already exists, because then we can add layers of graded detail to it and make it much richer than it was. Like the Mordor stuff, there was an earlier version of Mordor that was being done, and when we came to do Mordor, I added a whole other layer of deco to it that really, I thought, brought it in to be making it cool.
I want to go back to an earlier question, which had to do with what our favorite visuals are, and two things one, I think for most artists, it's really hard to look at your work and think, wow, how, like, that's all, like, all you see are your mistakes. And so for me, the places where I have that experience is when I see either just the work of some of the other artists, but also something happens when, you know, we'll hand a set off to the world team and the world team will set it up, and, you know, the day file and the lighting will affect it, and you'll be coming at it and you'll see something come over the rise, and it just happens to coincide with the music swelling, and you just have a moment where everything just comes together. And that is, no individual has done that, you know, that's, and, you know, those moments happen all the time. And sometimes they happen, you know, with the subject being what I consider to be not such great art, you know, but like, what a moment. One of the ones that I think we were able to capture is we did it was an in-game cinematic of the reveal of the Black Gate, and that was one that I felt like that just transcended all the pieces. You know, it really came together for me. I was very happy with how that one came out.
Yep. So, because we have as robust a cosmetic system as we have in LOTRO, and people are able to really customize the look of their characters, we get a lot of requests for, will you please look at my outfits? I've got some suggestions. I want this dress. You know, we see a lot of individual artwork on Pinterest, you know, Twitter. And there are blogs entirely for that. So... but you can't let that stuff influence you, right? So how do you go? Oh, you can? Okay.
Why not?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, how do you? So, would you ever consider basically a design your own dress contest, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually done some of that stuff over the years. I think we've had a mount contest. I think we've had a cloak contest. This I think was many years ago. There are some things that, you know, there are technical constraints that are hard to impart in a way that makes them sort of like, if I were to list all the things you really have to watch out for to make you know, a cloak, sure, it's make it this shape and you're probably good, but you know, dresses have a whole boatload of considerations, but you know, there's probably a way to bridge that gap and do that. I mean, that actually sounds pretty cool, Jerry. If you think that would be something that we could do, let's do it.
Nice. Technically, do you know, someone is asking a question. When we do dyes, why on a piece of equipment can we only do one color? Can we not do multiple color dyes? Is that a technical thing, I assume?
The answer is our current implementation is technically limited because of the way we create our materials and the different, you know, our material permutations are pretty complicated, and the dye channel is just one piece of it, but it includes a whole bunch of other things. Now, we can do multicolored dyes, but it comes at a certain cost in terms of you know, at various graphic settings, some of the material choices collapse, right?
Okay.
So and so there's like, what happens at low settings? You know, there's a bunch of things that we need to sort of make sure are okay, and then there's the you know, some of it just has to do with it is already hard to make everything dyeable. Like this is like, whenever you're like, you know, a new armor set comes up as a subject for development, you know, it's like, oh cool, I've got this idea, and then you're like, oh, but I got to figure out a way to make the shoulder dyeable and the helmet dyeable and the boots dyeable and the gloves dyeable. Like how do I? Like you know, sometimes that limits how you can approach a design. So if you're saying no, you actually have to make them dyeable with two colors now. That makes it even harder. So I suppose the challenge is to find a way, if we were going to do something like that, to do it in a systematic way that isn't limiting, you know, that ends up being a net gain. And so far, with everything else we've been doing, that just hasn't materialized.
Cool. So speaking of things materializing, we had we do pieces of key art periodically for large you know, events in our game. Like we did one for Mordor. We've done one, you know, for most of our other expansions in the past, and we've done some for things. That is a whole different ball game, I imagine, in terms of concepting. But I think we kind of want to dip into those waters again at some point here in the relatively near future.
We've been talking about that, actually. This was not today, but maybe this was yesterday that we were talking about this. So and the last couple of key art sort of undertakings we did, I think were really successful. I was pretty psyched about the work with Ted Naismith, and then the big one that we did. It was a few years ago now. It was an artist named Michael Komark who did the Pelargir piece with Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, which I thought was awesome. And for both of those pieces, we managed to time it in a way where we knew enough about the look of how the thing was going to be implemented in game that we could work closely with them and show them how we were going to implement architecture and characters and monsters. And their work actually is aligned with the stuff in game in a way that some of the earlier promotional art was not, and that's actually really tricky, because this sort of goes back to what we were talking about with the concept earlier. A lot of the thing, many things aren't really mature in terms of their final look until later in the development process, which makes doing a complicated painting, it can be a time-consuming thing, and so getting that stuff lined up so you can actually do it is tricky. But we've been able to pull it off. We hope to do it again very soon.
Yes,
if the stars align for that one.
Awesome. Any kind of final thoughts here? Anything you want to mention?
Happy anniversary!
Yeah.
This
Thanks
is,
for still being with
thanks,
us.
fans.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been this is a time to reflect. It's 11 freaking years. It's actually for Mark.
Well, I've been here forever.
Yep.
But we
Before the forever.
And I'd like to say that it is our birthday, and we now have outhouses.
That's true. That's true. It's about
And
time.
if you could go
I'm not sure what the relationship is there.
Well, that's important. We finally can go to the bathroom.
Happy
And I
birthday.
purposely did vertex coloring to show if you look at the outhouse.
Mark, should we just stop you now?
Yeah, you should. But it'll show the reality.
You almost made it through.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, that's not.
Okay.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk to you hopefully again soon. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.